The cream-colored envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. 2 years of silence, and now this. An invitation to the O'Brien family holiday dinner. My hands trembled as I traced the gold-embossed lettering, remembering the last time I'd seen my mother-in-law's handwriting. I'm Gwendolyn, and until 2 years ago, I thought I had finally found my place in the world. Marriage to Terrence had given me not just a husband, but what I believed would be the family I never had growing up. How naive I was. You're not seriously considering going, are you? Sydney's voice crackled through my phone speaker. I had sent her a photo of the invitation moments after it arrived. I don't know, I admitted, pacing my kitchen. It feels like walking into the lion's den. After what Francesca did to you? Gwen, honey, you don't owe them anything. The memory of that fateful dinner party rushed back, making my chest tight. I could still hear Francesca's voice dripping with venom. If you hadn't encouraged Terrence to leave his father's firm, he wouldn't be in this position. You've ruined everything we built for him. Darling? Terrence's voice startled me from my thoughts. I hadn't heard him come home. Everything okay? I held up the invitation. His face fell slightly, understanding immediately. Mom sent it this morning. Why now? I asked, studying his expression. After 2 years of pretending I don't exist? Terrence loosened his tie and sank into a kitchen chair. She's been different lately. Lexi says she's worried about appearances. The country club crowd is talking. I couldn't help but laugh. Of course. Heaven forbid the O'Brien family image suffers. Gwen. Terrence reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Do you remember what you said when she turned the entire family against me? When she told everyone I was a gold digger who destroyed your career? My voice cracked. You said nothing, Terrence. You stood there and said nothing. I was caught off guard. You know how Mom gets... That's always the excuse, isn't it? You know how Mom gets. Well, I do know. She gets away with it because everyone lets her. The phone buzzed again. Sydney, probably worried about me. I ignored it. Things are different now, Terrence said softly. I'm different, and you're doing amazing things, Gwen. Maybe it's time to show them that. I walked to our living room window, looking out at the manicured lawns of our suburban neighborhood. The same neighborhood where Francesca had systematically turned every social connection against me, where whispers followed me at the grocery store, where former friends crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Your mother didn't just hurt me, Terrence. She tried to break me. I know. He came up behind me, his reflection visible in the window. But maybe that's exactly why you should come. Show her she failed. The invitation seemed to pulse with possibility. I thought about my latest project, the Women's Empowerment Initiative that was gaining traction, about the meetings with potential investors, the growing network of supporters, about everything Francesca didn't know. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lexi. Please come. Things need to change. Lexi knows about the invitation? I turned to Terrence. He nodded. She helped Mom write the guest list. She's been asking about you. That was unexpected. Lexi had been one of the first to turn against me, parroting Francesca's accusations at every opportunity. If she was reaching out now... The dinner's in 3 weeks, Terrence said. Just think about it. I picked up the invitation again, running my finger along the edge. 3 weeks. A lot could happen in 3 weeks. Okay, I said finally. I'll think about it. Terrence smiled, relief visible on his face. He didn't notice my other hand was already reaching for my phone, typing a message to Sydney. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's time to accelerate our plans. As Terrence headed upstairs to change, I stood in our kitchen, holding both the invitation and my phone. Francesca had taught me an important lesson 2 years ago. In her world, power wasn't about money or social status. It was about control. She had controlled the narrative, controlled the family, controlled everything. But she didn't know what I'd learned in the past 2 years. She didn't know about the network I'd built, the allies I'd made, the information I'd gathered. She didn't know that her perfectly timed invitation had just given me exactly what I needed, an audience. I placed the invitation on our calendar and smiled. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to ensure that this time I would be the one in control. You're sure about this? Sydney pushed her coffee mug aside and leaned forward across the cafe table. If what Jasmine told you is true, it's true. I slid my phone across the table, showing her the emails Jasmine had forwarded me. Francesca's been siphoning money from her charity foundation for years, using it to fund her lifestyle while claiming tax benefits. Sydney's eyes widened as she scrolled through the documents. How did Jasmine even get access to these? Turns out being horrible to your executive assistant has consequences. I couldn't help but smile. Jasmine's been collecting evidence for months, ever since Francesca blamed her for a missing donation that Francesca herself had pocketed. The cafe buzzed with morning activity, but we kept our voices low. 2 years ago, I would have worried about Francesca's spies overhearing us. Now I almost wanted them to. Harry's waiting for us at the office. Sydney checked her watch. He's bringing the foundation paperwork. Are you ready? I gathered my things, remembering the day Francesca had orchestrated my social death. The country club lunch where she'd announced to everyone that I'd manipulated Terrence into leaving his father's law firm, knowing it would fail. The tears she'd shed while describing how I'd torn her family apart. More than ready, I replied. Harry's office overlooked the city, all glass and chrome and success. He greeted us with his characteristic warmth, but I could see the businessman beneath the friendly exterior. The numbers look solid, he said, spreading documents across his desk. Your social enterprise plan is exactly what we've been looking for, supporting women in business, providing mentorship, creating sustainable employment. It's perfect. And the funding? Sydney asked. Harry smiled. The foundation's prepared to commit $2 million in initial funding, with potential for more based on results. But Gwendolyn, are you sure you want to name it after the O'Brien family? Absolutely. I met his gaze steadily. The O'Brien Women's Business Initiative has a certain ring to it, don't you think? My phone buzzed. A text from Lexi. Coffee tomorrow? Need to talk. Excuse me, I said, stepping away to respond. As I typed, I heard Sydney and Harry discussing launch logistics. Everything okay? Sydney asked when I returned. Better than okay. Lexi wants to meet. Harry raised an eyebrow. Your sister-in-law, the one who sided with Francesca? People can surprise you, I said, remembering Lexi's text about the dinner invitation. Sometimes they just need a reason to choose differently. Back at home that evening, I found Terrence in his home office, surrounded by case files. He looked up when I entered, his face tired but hopeful. How was your day? He asked. Productive. I perched on his desk. Terrence, I need to ask you something. When you left your father's firm, was it really because of my encouragement? He put down his pen, looking surprised. Is that what you've thought all this time? Your mother seemed pretty convinced. Gwen, he took my hand. I left because I discovered Dad was overcharging clients and falsifying billable hours. Mom knows that. She just couldn't face the scandal it would have caused if I'd gone public. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, not of leaving. That was the right thing to do. But of letting Mom twist the story, of not defending you. He squeezed my hand. I'm still ashamed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jasmine. Found more documents. You need to see these. I have to go, I said, standing. But Terrence, thank you for telling me. Outside, the evening air was cool against my face. I called Sydney. You're not going to believe what Terrence just told me, I began. Hold that thought, she interrupted. Harry just called. The board approved the funding. We're launching in 2 weeks. I stopped walking. 2 weeks? But the family dinner is exactly 1 week after the launch, Sydney finished. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? I thought about Francesca's face when she realized what I'd built, about the press coverage the launch would generate, about the O'Brien name attached to a multi-million-dollar women's initiative that she had no control over. Jasmine has more documents, I said, and I'm meeting Lexi tomorrow. The pieces are falling into place, Sydney replied. You ready for this? I looked up at the darkening sky, feeling stronger than I had in years. Francesca taught me that reputation is everything. Time to show her I was paying attention. As I walked home, I drafted a reply to Jasmine. Send everything you have. It's time to set things right. The game was changing, and for once I held all the cards. The coffee shop where Lexi suggested meeting was far from our usual haunts. A small indie place downtown where Francesca's social circle would never set foot. I spotted her immediately, fidgeting with a sugar packet in the corner booth. "You look different," she said as I sat down. The hostility I remembered was gone from her voice, replaced by something that sounded almost like admiration. 2 years will do that. I studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "You look tired. Mom's been difficult." Lexi glanced around before leaning forward. "I saw the announcement about your initiative in the business journal. 2 million in funding? That's incredible. That's just the beginning." I kept my voice neutral. "But I'm curious why you wanted to meet." Lexi's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee. "I found something in Mom's study. Documents about Dad's law firm, about what really happened with Terrence." "I know about the fraud," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "How?" "Terrence told me. Finally." "God, Gwen, I'm so sorry." Tears welled in her eyes. "I believed her. When she said you'd manipulated him, turned him against the family, I actually believed her." Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Harry. "Major development. Need you at the office ASAP." "I have to go," I said, standing. "But Lexi, thank you for telling me." "Wait." She grabbed my arm. "There's more. Mom's planning something for the dinner. I don't know what, but she's been making calls, meeting with people from Dad's old firm." I smiled. "Let her plan. I'll be ready." At Harry's office, Sydney was already waiting with him, practically bouncing with excitement. "The Thompson Foundation wants to match our funding," Harry announced without preamble. "They're impressed with the initiative's focus on local business development. This would double our impact." 4 million? I sank into a chair. "That would let us expand the program nationwide." "And here's the best part," Sydney added. "They want to announce it at the launch event. The press coverage will be massive." My phone buzzed. Jasmine again. "Francesca's in full panic mode. She knows something's coming but can't figure out what." "There's something else," Harry said, pulling out a folder. "We've been approached about turning the initiative into a full-scale foundation, independent from my organization, with you as executive director." I thought about Francesca's charity foundation, the one she'd used as her personal piggy bank, about how she'd wielded it like a weapon in social circles. "The O'Brien Women's Foundation," I said slowly, "has a nice ring to it." "Better than nice," Sydney grinned. "It's perfect." That evening I found Terrence cooking dinner, something he'd started doing more often lately. "Smells good," I said, wrapping my arms around him from behind. "Just pasta." He turned to face me. "I saw Lexi today. She told me about your meeting. Are you angry?" "Angry?" He looked surprised. "Gwen, I'm proud of you. What you're building, it's amazing. Even if it means using your family name?" "Especially that." He stirred the pasta sauce. "Mom spent years using that name to hurt people. Maybe it's time someone used it to help instead." My phone lit up with another text from Jasmine. "Found the smoking gun. Full records of every misappropriated donation. Meeting tomorrow?" "Everything okay?" Terrence asked, noticing my expression. "Better than okay." I showed him my phone. "Your mother's about to learn some very expensive lessons about karma." Later that night, I sat in our home office, reviewing the launch event details. The guest list included every major business and philanthropy figure in the city, people whose opinion Francesca had always cared about more than anything. Sydney called just as I was finishing up. "The Thompson Foundation wants to move up the announcement," she said. "They're thinking 2 days before the family dinner." I thought about Lexi's warning about Francesca's plans, about the documents Jasmine had found, about the carefully constructed social hierarchy Francesca had built her life around. "Perfect timing," I replied. "By the way, add 2 more names to the launch guest list." "Who?" "Terrence's father's former law partners. I think they'll be very interested in what we have to say." As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window. The scared, isolated woman from 2 years ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that the best revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about creation. and I was about to create something magnificent. She's been calling everyone, Jasmine whispered, sliding a notepad across the cafe table. These are all the people she's reached out to in the past week. She's trying to rally support before the dinner. I scanned the list, recognizing most of the names from my previous life in Francesca's social circle. Has she figured out anything about the launch? No, but she knows something's coming. She's been asking about your meetings with Harry. Jasmine nervously adjusted her glasses. Yesterday, she threw a paperweight at her assistant when she couldn't find your foundation's registration details. My phone buzzed with a text from Sydney. Thompson Foundation press release approved. They're going big. You should go, I told Jasmine. The less time you spend with me, the better. She stood but hesitated. Gwen, make it count. She deserves everything coming to her. At the foundation office, Sydney was coordinating with the event planners while Harry reviewed the final contracts. The guest list is confirmed, Sydney announced, including both senior partners from Terrence's father's old firm. They seemed very interested in attending. I bet they did, I smiled, especially after those anonymous tips about Francesca's creative accounting. Harry looked up from his paperwork. Are you sure about this timing? The launch? The Thompson announcement? The family dinner? It's going to be an intense week. That's the point. I sat down across from him. Francesca's power comes from controlling the narrative. It's time for a new story. My phone rang. Terrence. Mom just called, he said without preamble. She's trying to convince me not to attend the dinner. Says she has proof you've been working against the family. I couldn't help laughing. Did you tell her you're on the foundation's board of directors? Not yet. I'm saving that for the dinner. His voice softened. Are you ready for tomorrow's press announcement? Almost. Just meeting with the first group of women we're supporting. Want to join? Wouldn't miss it. The community center was buzzing when we arrived. 20 women, all with business plans and dreams they'd been told were impossible, waited in the conference room. Ladies, I began, welcome to the first meeting of the O'Brien Women's Foundation Mentorship Program. For the next 2 hours, we listened to their stories, their challenges, their hopes. Maria, who needed funding for her catering business. Sarah, whose tech startup had been dismissed by male investors. Rebecca, whose sustainable fashion line just needed a chance. This is real, Terrence whispered as we listened. What you're building, it's going to change lives. My phone lit up with a text from Lexi. Mom's coming unhinged. She found out about the press announcement tomorrow. Then another from Jasmine. She's calling an emergency board meeting for her charity foundation. Something about protecting the family legacy. Showtime, I murmured. Back at the office, Sydney was handling last-minute press details when Harry burst in. The Thompson Foundation didn't just match our funding, he announced. They're tripling it. $6 million, Gwen. They want to make this the largest women's business initiative in the state. Sydney dropped her phone. $6 million? With a 3-year commitment, Harry added. They're announcing it at the launch. My phone buzzed again. An email from one of Terrence's father's former partners. Interesting information about Francesca's foundation. Would like to discuss further. Dinner tomorrow? Forward that to our legal team, Sydney said, reading over my shoulder. Everything by the book. That evening, I found Terrence in our kitchen, staring at his phone. Mom's been calling non-stop, he said. She's desperate to talk before tomorrow's announcement. What are you going to tell her? He looked up, his expression determined. Nothing. She lost the right to explanations 2 years ago. My phone chimed with a final text for the day, from Lexi. Just overheard Mom on the phone. She's threatening to expose something about you at the dinner. But Gwen, I don't think she realizes what's really coming. I showed the message to Terrence. You know, he said, pulling me close. 2 years ago, Mom told everyone you would destroy this family. She never considered that you might actually save it. I thought about tomorrow's press announcement, about the launch event, about the dinner that would change everything, about the women whose lives would be transformed by what we'd built. Your mother taught me something valuable, I said. She showed me that real power isn't about destroying people. It's about building something so magnificent that they destroy themselves trying to tear it down. Terrence kissed my forehead. Ready for tomorrow? I smiled, thinking of Francesca frantically trying to maintain control of a situation that had slipped through her fingers months ago. Tomorrow's just the beginning. The press conference room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras trained on the podium where Harry stood announcing the Thompson Foundation's involvement. "And now," Harry said, "I'd like to introduce the executive director of the O'Brien Women's Foundation, Gwendolyn." The door burst open. Francesca stood there, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, her face flushed with anger. "This is a fraud," she announced to the room. "This woman has no right to use our family name." The reporters turned their cameras, capturing every moment, exactly as planned. I stepped up to the podium, my voice steady. "Actually, Francesca, as a member of the O'Brien family and with full support of both my husband and sister-in-law, I have every right. But please, join us. You should hear about the wonderful work your family name will be supporting." Terence appeared behind his mother, gently but firmly guiding her to a seat. The cameras kept rolling as Harry continued, announcing the $6 million commitment. "$6 million?" Francesca whispered, her face paling. I delivered my prepared speech, outlining our initiatives, introducing some of the women we'd be supporting. With each word, I could see Francesca shrinking further into her seat. After the press conference, she cornered me in the hallway. "You think you're clever, don't you? Using our name for your little charity project?" "Foundation," I corrected. "And unlike your foundation, ours actually helps people instead of funding shopping sprees at Neiman Marcus." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Mom." Lexi appeared beside us. "Stop. It's over." "Over?" Francesca turned on her daughter. "You knew about this?" "I'm on the board," Lexi said quietly, "along with Terence. And we've seen the documents, Mom. All of them." My phone buzzed. Sydney texting that the press coverage was already going viral. Perfect. "You can't prove anything," Francesca hissed. "Actually," said a deep voice behind her, "they can." It was Marcus, her foundation's former accountant. "I've already provided all the documentation to the relevant authorities." Francesca's face went from red to white. "Marcus, but you realized it was time to come clean?" "Yes." He nodded to me. "Mrs. O'Brien's foundation showed me there's a better way to do things." Later that afternoon, I met Sydney at our office to review the media coverage. "It's everywhere," she said, scrolling through headlines. "O'Brien Women's Foundation launches with historic investment. New foundation promises to transform local business landscape." And my personal favorite, family drama erupts at press conference, highlighting need for women's empowerment. My phone rang. Terence. "Mom's called an emergency family meeting before the dinner," he said. "She's desperate to damage control." "Let her try," I replied. "How's Lexi holding up?" "Better than expected. She's finally standing up to Mom. Actually, she's on her way to see you." Lexi arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a thick folder. "More foundation documents," she said, dropping them on my desk. "Mom's been busy trying to hide everything, but I've been making copies for months." "Why?" I asked. "What changed?" Lexi's eyes welled up. "Watching what she did to you, realizing that if she could do that to you, she could do it to anyone, and then seeing what you built instead of letting her destroy you." She wiped her eyes. "I want to be part of that." Sydney, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "We could use another board member with financial expertise." My phone buzzed again. Jasmine. "Francesca's having a meltdown. She's threatening to expose family secrets at the dinner." "Let her," Lexi said, reading the message over my shoulder. "We have nothing left to hide. She's the only one with secrets." That evening, Terence and I sat in our garden, reviewing the day's events. "The dinner's in 2 days," he said. "Mom's going to try something desperate." "I know." I showed him Jasmine's message. "Are you ready for that?" I thought about the press conference, about Francesca's face when she realized she'd lost control, about the women whose lives would change because of what we'd built. "You know what the difference is between your mother and me?" I said. "She tears things down to feel powerful. I built something that actually makes a difference." My phone lit up with another message, this time from Harry. "Board meeting tomorrow. Time to discuss phase 2 of the expansion." I showed it to Terence, watching his smile grow. 2 days, he said. Think Mom can handle any more surprises? She'd better get ready, I replied, because the dinner is just the beginning. Above us, storm clouds gathered, promising rain. Perfect weather for what was coming. The IRS is asking questions. Jasmine's voice trembled over the phone. Francesca's been in meetings with lawyers all morning. She knows tomorrow's dinner is her last chance to salvage something. I glanced at the newspaper on my desk. Our foundation's launch dominated the business section. How's she handling it? She threw her phone at the wall when she saw the stock market response to your announcement. Your foundation's corporate partners have seen their share prices jump 15%. A knock at my office door interrupted us. Sydney entered, followed by Harry and, surprisingly, Marcus, Francesca's former accountant. I'll call you back, I told Jasmine. We have a situation, Sydney said, closing the door. Marcus? He cleared his throat. Francesca's planning to announce a merger between her foundation and yours at the dinner. She's already drafted the press release claiming it was her idea all along, a mother and daughter-in-law partnership. She can't do that, Harry said. Our board would never approve it. She's desperate, I replied, but this is perfect. Marcus, can you get me a copy of that press release? Already done. He handed me a folder, along with something else you should see. Inside was a document that made my breath catch, a confession letter from Terrence's father about the law firm's fraudulent practices, dated just before his death. Francesca had hidden it for years. My phone buzzed. Lexi. Mom's invited the old law firm partners to dinner. She's planning something big. Of course she is, I muttered, then looked at Marcus. How would you like to attend a family dinner? The next morning, I met Terrence for breakfast at our favorite cafe. His face was drawn with worry. Dad's letter, he said quietly. All this time she knew. Are you okay? He reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm angry, not at you, at her, at myself for not seeing it sooner. You're seeing it now, I squeezed his hand. That's what matters. Sydney called as we were finishing. The Thompson Foundation just released another statement praising our initiative. They're calling it a model for ethical business practices, a direct shot at Francesca's foundation. Perfect timing, I smiled. How are the dinner preparations coming? Everything's set. Harry's people are standing by with the press release about the federal investigation into Francesca's foundation. We release it the moment she makes her move. Back at the office, I found Lexi waiting for me. Mom's been calling all morning, she said, trying to convince me to support her merger announcement. She doesn't know I've seen Dad's letter. Are you ready for tomorrow? Lexi straightened her shoulders. More than ready. I've spent years watching her manipulate everyone around her. It ends now. My phone lit up with a text from Jasmine. She's meeting with her lawyers again. They look worried. Then another from Marcus. IRS scheduled an audit. They're very interested in certain offshore accounts. The pieces are falling into place, Sydney said, reviewing the messages. But Gwen, are you sure about this? Once we release everything? She made her choice 2 years ago, I replied, when she decided to destroy me instead of accepting me. Now she gets to live with the consequences. That evening, Terrence and I stood in our closet, selecting outfits for the dinner. Mom called again, he said, adjusting his tie. Wanted to know if we'd be interested in a family business partnership. Said she's willing to forgive the past. Forgive? I couldn't help laughing. That's rich, coming from her. I told her we'd discuss everything at dinner. He turned to face me. Are you nervous? I smoothed my dress, a deep blue number that radiated confidence. No, for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of her at all. My phone chimed with messages from our allies. Sydney, press is confirmed for after dinner. Harry, legal team standing by. Marcus, documents ready. Lexi, Mom's having the chef prepare your favorite dessert. She's trying so hard to pretend everything's normal. Your mother's in for quite a surprise, I told Terrence, showing him the messages. She always said appearances were everything, he replied. Tomorrow she'll learn just how right she was. As we got ready for bed, one final message came through, from Jasmine. She's scared, Gwen. Really scared. She knows something's coming but can't stop it. I thought about Francesca, alone in her mansion, desperately trying to maintain control of a situation that had spiraled far beyond her reach, about the carefully constructed world she'd built on lies and manipulation, about how it would all come crashing down over dessert tomorrow night. "Ready for bed?" Terrence called. "Almost," I replied, sending one last message to our team. "Tomorrow we show her what real power looks like." Francesca's mansion looked exactly as I remembered it, imposing, perfectly maintained, and cold. As Terrence and I walked up the driveway, my phone buzzed with final confirmations from our team. "Ready?" Terrence squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, the front door swung open. Francesca stood there in an expensive new dress, her smile brittle. "Darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheeks as if the last 2 years hadn't happened. "You look wonderful. Success clearly agrees with you." The dining room was set for 12. I recognized the law firm partners, looking uncomfortable in their seats. Marcus sat quietly in the corner, nodding slightly as we entered. Lexi was already there, her face tense. "Wine?" Francesca offered, playing the perfect hostess. "We have so much to celebrate." "Indeed we do," I replied, accepting a glass. Dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness. Francesca dominated the conversation, dropping hints about exciting family announcements and new partnerships. I caught the law partners exchanging nervous glances. My phone vibrated silently. Sydney. "Press release ready. Give the signal when you want it live." As dessert was being served, Francesca stood, tapping her glass. "I'd like to make an announcement." "Actually," I interrupted, standing as well, "I have something to share first." The color drained from her face. "I don't think—" "Marcus." I nodded to him. He stood, pulling out a folder. "What is he doing here?" Francesca's voice sharpened. "Showing us some interesting documents," I replied, "about your foundation's finances, about Dad's confession letter, about everything you've been hiding." The law partners shifted uncomfortably. One reached for his phone. "I wouldn't," Lexi said quietly. "You might want to hear this first." "This is ridiculous," Francesca laughed, but her hand trembled as she set down her glass. "I don't know what you think you're doing." "Protecting the family name," I cut in. "Isn't that what you always said was most important?" I nodded to Marcus, who began distributing copies of the documents. The law partners' faces went pale as they read. "You can't prove any of this," Francesca snapped. "Actually," Marcus spoke up, "the IRS already has copies, as does the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." Francesca lunged for the documents, but Terrence stepped between us. "It's over, Mom." "Over?" She laughed hysterically. "You think you can come into my house? My family?" "Your family," I stepped forward. "The one you turned against me? The one you've been lying to for years?" I pulled out my phone, showing Sydney's message. "Press release ready." "Right now," I continued, "reporters are waiting to publish 2 very different stories. One about how the O'Brien Women's Foundation is expanding nationwide, backed by some of the most respected names in philanthropy. The other about how Francesca O'Brien's decades of financial fraud finally caught up with her." "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "Try me." I met her gaze steadily. "You taught me well, remember? About power, about reputation, about consequences." The room was dead silent. One of the law partners stood abruptly. "I think we should go." "Sit down," Francesca commanded, but her authority was crumbling. "No, Mother," Lexi spoke up. "You don't give orders anymore." Francesca's legs seemed to give out, and she sank into her chair. "What do you want?" "Resign from your foundation," I said. "All assets transfer to our organization. You'll cite health reasons, take a quiet retirement. In return, we handle this discreetly." "And if I refuse?" I showed her my phone again. "Then I press send, and tomorrow's headlines write themselves." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Francesca reached for her purse with shaking hands, pulled out a pen. "The papers," she whispered. Marcus provided them, already prepared. As she signed, I could see tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of rage and humiliation. Was it worth it? She asked bitterly. Destroying everything I built? You destroyed it yourself, Terrence replied. Gwen just showed everyone the truth. I sent a quick text to Sydney. Plan A. Release the expansion announcement only. As the law partners fled and Marcus gathered the signed documents, Francesca sat alone at her grand dining table, her perfect world in pieces around her. Lexi, I said quietly, would you like to ride with us? She looked at her mother one last time, then nodded. Yes, I think it's time for a change. As we left the mansion, my phone lit up with notifications about the Foundation's expansion announcement. Tomorrow, thousands of women would have new opportunities because of what we'd built. How does it feel? Terrence asked as we drove away. I looked back at the mansion, growing smaller in the rearview mirror. Like justice. And now, please welcome our keynote speaker, Executive Director Gwendolyn O'Brien. The conference hall erupted in applause as I approached the podium. In the front row, Terrence and Lexi beamed. Sydney gave me a thumbs up from the side stage. When we launched this foundation, I began, people asked why we chose to focus on women who'd faced obstacles and opposition. Today, I want to tell you about Maria, who just opened her third restaurant, about Sarah, whose tech company went public last week, about Rebecca, whose sustainable fashion line is now in major department stores. My phone buzzed silently, a news alert about Francesca. I ignored it. She'd chosen a quiet life in Palm Beach, exactly as we'd arranged. These women didn't just survive, I continued. They thrived. They built something meaningful, not despite the obstacles, but because of them. They turned their pain into purpose. After the speech, Harry pulled me aside. The Thompson Foundation called. They want to double their commitment again. Perfect timing, I smiled. Lexi just finished restructuring our expansion plan. Speaking of Lexi, Sydney joined us. Have you seen the changes she's made to the mentorship program? Applications have tripled. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Jasmine. Francesca asked me to deliver a letter to you. Should I bring it? Yes, I replied. Come to the office. The letter arrived an hour later. Francesca's elegant handwriting filled a single page. Gwendolyn, I watched your speech online. You've built something remarkable. Everything I pretended my foundation was but never achieved. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know. You proved me wrong. About everything. Francesca. What are you going to do? Terrence asked, reading over my shoulder. Nothing, I replied. Some bridges stay burned. That evening, we hosted a dinner at our home. The kind of gathering Francesca would have hated. Maria brought food from her restaurant. Sarah demonstrated her latest tech innovation. Rebecca showed off her new designs. Lexi discussed expansion plans with Harry, while Sydney coordinated with our international partners. Remember when you first pitched this idea? Sydney asked, joining me in the kitchen. You said you wanted to build something that would outlast Francesca's spite. Look at them, I nodded toward our guests. They're building things that will outlast all of us. My phone lit up with a message from Marcus. Final audit complete. Everything's clean. You've created something extraordinary here. Terrence wrapped his arms around me from behind. Proud of you, he whispered. It's not just me anymore, I replied, watching Lexi mentor a young entrepreneur in the corner. It's all of us. The doorbell rang. One last guest. I opened it to find Rebecca's daughter, clutching a business proposal. Mrs. O'Brien, she said nervously. Mom said you might look at my idea. It's about sustainable tech for small businesses. Come in, I smiled, and call me Gwen. Let's talk about your vision. Later, as our guests shared stories and plans, I stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet. My phone showed another news alert about Francesca, something about her joining a small charity board in Florida. You okay? Lexi joined me outside. Better than okay, I replied. You know what I realized? Your mother spent her life trying to control a legacy. We're actually building one. Speaking of building, Lexi grinned, wait until you see tomorrow's numbers. The foundation's impact metrics are off the charts. Inside, I could hear laughter, plans being made, dreams taking shape. This was real power, not the kind that tears people down, but the kind that lifts them up. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from one of our first grant recipients. Just hired 3 more women for my tech team. Thank you for believing in me. Gwen? Sydney called from inside. The Thompson Foundation is on the line. They want to discuss global expansion. I looked at Lexi, who nodded eagerly. Ready to change more lives? Always, I replied, heading back inside to where Terrence waited with the phone. This wasn't the ending Francesca had planned for the O'Brien name. It was better. We'd turned her weapon of social destruction into a force for transformation. Every woman we helped was living proof that the best revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about building something they couldn't tear down. Let's talk expansion, I said into the phone, surrounded by the family I'd chosen and the legacy we were building together. Behind me, the sun set on another day of possibilities, of dreams realized, of bridges built instead of burned. This was my victory, not in defeating Francesca, but in creating something that made her irrelevant. And we were just getting started.